Over the last couple of centuries, our whole idea of what art is, what it's for, and why we should even care about it has been completely flipped upside down. In this explainer, we're going to trace that wild journey. It's really a story of how art lost its anchor and has been searching for a new one ever since. Okay, let's get into it.
So we have to start here, with this question. I mean, it's a phrase we all know, right? It just feels like common sense. What I think is beautiful, you might think is hideous, and that's that. It's all subjective. But what if I told you that for most of human history, that idea would have sounded completely nuts?
Yeah, that's right. The main belief wasn't that beauty was some kind of personal preference, it was that beauty was a universal, objective thing. The idea was that some things are beautiful in the same way that 2 plus 2 is 4. It's just a fact, and your opinion on it doesn't really change anything. So how on earth could anyone believe that?
Well, to get our heads around this, we have to jump back to the late 18th century and talk about one of the heavy hitters of philosophy, Immanuel Kant. He came up with this incredibly powerful argument that the feeling of beauty isn't random at all. Nope. He said it's actually baked into the very wiring of the human mind.
Okay, so here's how Kant broke it down. He said every single human mind, no matter who you are or where you're from, has two basic tools it uses to make sense of the world. First, you've got the imagination, which just takes in all the raw data from your senses and forms an image. Then you've got the understanding, which tries to slap a label on that image like, oh, that's a tree, or that's a chair. Kant's big idea was that when we see something beautiful, its design creates this perfect, satisfying harmony, a kind of free play between those two parts of our mind. And here's the kicker. Since we all share that same mental hardware, we should all feel that same pleasure.
And this is where his theory gets really wild. If beauty is just a product of our shared mental machinery, then when you say this is beautiful, you're not just stating your personal taste, you're actually making a claim about a universal human experience. You're not just saying, hey, I like this. You're saying you should like this too, because your mind is built just like mine. For a little while, it seemed like art had found its solid, universal anchor in human reason.
But that anchor was not going to hold for long. The 19th century rolls in, and with it, a whole new wave of thinkers who started to poke holes in this timeless, universal idea. They started to argue that you just can't separate art from the messy, chaotic, ever-changing reality of human life.
You can actually watch the anchor start to drag. First, Hegel shows up and says, hold on, art isn't timeless, it's a product of its specific moment in history. Then, a few decades later, Karl Marx pushes it even further, arguing that art is just part of society's superstructure, shaped by economics and the fight between classes. And then Friedrich Nietzsche comes in and lands the knockout blow. He claims art isn't about calm reason at all, it's about a primal, chaotic, irrational drive he called the will to power.
So for Nietzsche, art wasn't just about creating beautiful, orderly things. That's the Apollonian side. It was also about tapping into the raw, chaotic, sometimes terrifying life force, the Dionysian. Think about the difference between the perfect, rational design of a Greek temple and the wild, drunken frenzy of a ritual to Dionysus. Nietzsche said, the greatest art holds both of these forces in a super tense, powerful balance. So the big takeaway here is that art is no longer just a clear window to some calm, rational truth.
And just like that, with these new ideas, art is ripped from its stable mooring. It's not seen as this pure thing anymore. Now it's seen as a product of its time, a reflection of economic power, a tool for social change, or even a weapon to channel our deepest instincts. That single stable purpose for art, it was gone.
And right as all these philosophical earthquakes were happening, a technological revolution was about to change the game in a way nobody saw coming. The 20th century ushered in a force that would change not just how we think about art, but the very nature of art itself. All of a sudden, for the first time in human history, we could make perfect, identical, mass-produced copies of images. Just think about how huge that is. Before this, every single painting, every sculpture was a one-of-a-kind original. Now, images could be everywhere for everyone. And the philosopher Walter Benjamin saw this as a complete game changer. Benjamin came up with the word for what was being lost in this new age: the aura. The aura is that special, almost magical feeling you get when you're standing in front of the real, original Mona Lisa at the Louvre. It's its unique presence, its history, the knowledge that this is the actual object Leonardo da Vinci touched. A poster, or a picture of it on your phone, no matter how high-res, can never, ever have that aura.
So how does this aura get destroyed? Well, first, the very existence of a perfect copy shatters the whole idea of a unique original.
Second, it rips the artwork out of its original home, its tradition. A statue that was once worshipped in a temple can now just be a picture in a textbook. And third, this changes art's whole job. It's no longer about ritual and reverence. It's about exhibition. It becomes information to be looked at, not an idol to be worshipped.
But Benjamin, who was writing in the 1930s as fascism was rising in Europe, saw a really terrifying dark side to all this. Without its traditional aura, art could be used for something else. The same tech that makes movies and photos could be used to stage huge political rallies, creating a kind of fake artwork designed not for you to think about, but to manipulate you. He called it the aestheticization of politics, and he saw it as one of the scariest tools of fascism.
Okay, so let's recap. Kant's universal truth is out the window. The 19th century ties art to history and power, and now technology has destroyed the special aura of the original object. With the anchor gone and the artwork itself knocked off its pedestal, the floodgates of interpretation were just thrown wide open.
This became the central question for thinkers in the second half of the 20th century. If there's no sacred, one-of-a-kind original, and if we can't just say the artist's intention is the final word, then where does the meaning of a piece of art even come from? Is there such a thing as a single correct interpretation anymore? A few major thinkers gave us different roadmaps. For Gadamer, meaning isn't set in stone. It's more like a living conversation between the artwork's past and our present. For Foucault, who was a bit more of a rebel, interpretation is about breaking the rules, challenging the power that society tries to impose on meaning. And then for Derrida, it's even crazier. He basically said any artwork is just lost in this giant sea of language, where trying to nail down one single stable meaning is completely impossible.
What all of these ideas point to is a famous concept, the death of the author. It's this idea that the artist's original intention doesn't get the final say anymore. The power has totally shifted. Now, it's the interpreter, the viewer, the reader. It's us. We're the ones left to make our own meaning in this crazy funhouse of endless reflections.
Which brings us, finally, to today. After this 250-year-long journey, from universal truth to a historical tool, to a reproducible image, to an endless ocean of interpretation, what is art even for now? What role could it possibly play in our world?
The philosopher Jean-François Lyotard, I think, just nailed the vibe of our time. We live in an age of eclecticism, basically a giant postmodern mashup. We can listen to reggae, watch a Western, look at a Renaissance painting on our phone, all in the same afternoon, totally stripped of their original context. Everything is available, all the time, which creates a culture that feels both incredibly rich and, honestly, a little unhinged. And this feeling is just cranked up to 11 by our lives online. I mean, we live in an age of total paradox. We have more freedom of expression than any humans in history, but we're also under constant surveillance. We can connect with a global community, but so many of us feel more alone than ever. We have all the world's information at our fingertips, but we're drowning in propaganda, constantly having to ask ourselves, is this real or is this just an image?
So in this fragmented, paradoxical world, what's an artist supposed to do? It seems like two main paths have opened up. One path is for art to be a tool for social criticism, to try and build trust, to speak truth to power, to remind us of our shared humanity in a cynical world. The other path is to just reflect the chaos back at us, to create ironic, boundary-pushing works in a kind of anything-goes free-for-all. So is art's job to try and fix the world, or just to hold up a mirror to it?
It's a tough question, but maybe, just maybe, after this long journey away from any kind of universal anchor, there's still something that ties us all together. This quote from JFK is a powerful reminder that underneath all the history, all the technology, all the endless debates, there's a shared human condition. It's a reality that kind of brings us right back to where we started with Kant, that search for what we all have in common.
And so, after 250 years of philosophy and revolution and technology, the question of what art means lands right back in our laps. In a world where beauty isn't a universal truth, where any masterpiece can be copied a million times, and where every meaning is up for debate, we're the ones who have to answer this for ourselves. What is it that gives art its power, its value, its aura for you?